that's fine. If not, that's okay. One of the people that's not here is actually Megan Wenner. She directs the pilot program. So she originally intended to be here, but she's not able to make it. But I'm Rob Akins. I am the director of the professional development program for the Delaware CTR, which is sponsoring the pilot grants that you guys are submitting for. I have other hats as well. I'm the site PI for the Delaware INBRE at Nemours, and I'm one of the MPIs for what's called the Idea States Pediatric Clinical Trials Network, which is an 18 idea states, but the funding actually comes from the Office of the Director. So I have a number of different hats. All of those, for those 3 grants, my work is all around professional development, especially for clinical and translational researchers. So that's why I'm here. Erin, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Regal. I am the program manager for the Nemours Office of Faculty Development, but I, before that, worked with the CTR for over a decade. So I've gone through this process quite a few times. So I'm here to help you guys in whatever you need to submit your grants.
And Julianne?
Hi, my name is Julianne Ross. I am also here to help with any needs that you may have, although I do not have as much experience as Erin. Erin has been guiding me through everything, so I am learning along with you guys. And so I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding with that process. But I am the program coordinator for the Professional Development Core of the CTR program. I also help out with INBRE, so I have I do a little bit of both, mostly CTR stuff. So if there's anything I can help with, please don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. And then we'll do we'll do alphabetical order. So Diana, just quick, short introduction.
Oh, I was going to do like a whole 15 minutes. No,
I know, that's why I said.
I'm Diana Corral, and I am a pediatric pathologist. I've been at Nemours for 18 years, and I'm also the director of the Biobank and Molecular Analysis Program, and I'm also the director of Surgical Pathology and Pathology. And yeah, that's me.
Margaret?
Hi there, my name is Margaret Gullidge. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm currently full-time faculty in Delaware State's Masters of OT program. I've only been in academia for 2 years, but I have a very long 30-plus year history as an occupational therapist. So while I'm very knowledgeable about clinical work, I'm going to be reaching out to all of you guys about the research world.
Sure, that's why we're here.
Yes.
Actually, that's one of the things we really want to do with the CTR, right? The CTR is the funding mechanism, is get people with significant clinical experience connected. Either they had done research before, they've never done it.
Mm-hmm.
Get them connected with research and up and running to whatever degree they would like to. So welcome.
Thank you.
And then Colin. You're muted, Colin, if you're talking.
Sorry, I'm like supervising my child during this meeting, and my in-laws just arrived. So I'm a cardiac intensivist, and most of my non-clinical research interest has been related to like chronic critical illness and various types of technological support, and I've also kind of transitioned into the nutrition realm. So my project is on nutrition, and I've never had like a major grant before, so this is definitely a totally new process for me. I'm not even really a clinical researcher technically. I'm a clinician educator.
Yep, we're going to convert you. You're going to be a clinical researcher. It's interesting that classification. There's a lot of researchers when you look into the records that Nemours keeps that are listed as clinical educators. So welcome to the club. You can keep that designation, but we're gonna support your research as much as possible. And a friend of mine used to say everybody does research, whether they realize it or not. So we're trying to get everybody involved. So we'll go through. This is meant to be very interactive. We'll go through some specific details about the pilot grants. Without Megan here, we won't be able to go through the interface. But if you have questions about the interface, right, you have to click and kind of upload things and put things in. we can answer them here, or we can set up separate meetings. But for reasons that have more to do with website design and sort of authorizations and how CTR is set up, my group can't access that site. So
Happy to be here.
Are there other people? And then in particular, talk about some of the things that are routine issues with submissions from junior investigators. And by junior just means that you're new to the research world, or you're trying to get a new project off the ground, yeah, especially around DE-CTR, Delaware CTR. Yes, way. Okay. I don't know if my computer can go any slower. I just seems like I spent a lot of time looking at that little blue thing going around. So you have already done the first two steps for the preliminary application, and you were invited to apply. So that's great. May 20th is the biggest deadline. These are all deadlines, but May 20th is the full application. So you've got 2 months to work on it, which is almost enough time if you have significant other responsibilities, which you all do. You'll be notified in August. The other big deadline is October 20th, and that is everything has to be done. So if you need IRB approval, or if you start with introductions then, and then if you're not sure whether you have to submit to the IRB, we want to talk to you about that soon, so that by the time October comes around, which seems like a pretty long way away from now, you have your approval or your waiver or whatever you need. And that applies also if it's an animal study to IACUC, any human subjects, any certifications that you need to be able to start the project have to be submitted by October 20th. And I'm emphasizing that because no matter how many times we emphasize that, we always have someone that doesn't submit in time. They just don't account for enough back and forth with the IRB. And a lot of times it's understandable, right? We're investigators that haven't worked with the Nemours IRB before, or they're trying a new kind of research and they're just not sure what to expect. They don't usually put enough time, lead time in. And then NIH has to approve these. It's a U54. U grants are cooperative grants, so there's a lot of work that happens between NIH and the CTR program. So NIH has to approve these. So once you're done, and through you've been awarded basically by us locally, you have all your paperwork. There's this big gap in here, but then that's to get everything clarified at the institutions. Then NIH has to approve, and we anticipate starting you all in January. So I think you're all familiar with that. The two things,
Rob, can I interrupt?
You can.
I'm sorry. So is there like a possibility that we are awarded in August and like November 15th, they say no?
There is, but that almost always has to do with the October 20th deadline. So the only times I've ever, right, it's just something's not kosher with the IRB, or they're, NIH does not review for merit. And I don't want to denigrate what NIH does, because they do have to review these, but they're making sure that the title of the grant matches the title of the IRB, that whatever you said you're going to collect in the proposal is what you told the IRB you're going to collect. So it's more pro forma, but they do have to sign off on it. And to your question, if you don't have it, or we've had occasions where the wording's different, and NIH doesn't like that, right? They're trying to make it audit proof. Those are the only times we've seen things come back without approval from NIH. It's a small, non-zero chance, but if you do everything else up till October 20th, it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
There's some useful contacts. So I mentioned Hagen. Yeah, sure.
Can I also interrupt you?
Yeah.
If we, for example, already have IRB approval for this project, or we're
INBRE at
start recruiting patients into the research project even before the money is formally dispersed.
All right. So you want the technical answer or the practical answer? Because technically, you cannot encumber, spend, or even tell anybody it's an NIH funded project until you get notification from NIH.
Okay, but let me give you a different example. So we currently enroll patients who are having surgery in the ICU in the biobank, and we are discussing consenting patients for stool samples at the same time as doing the consent for other samples like blood samples and tissue samples, and thus would be able to collect stool samples, which is what all we need from patients that doesn't involve retrospective or prospective chart review.
So the way to distinguish the dividing line, and it's good that you're using the biobank, right? Because that's a clearer mechanism. But the dividing line is when you can spend the money and when you can say that you have an NIH approved study. So if you're encumbering,
that's all I need to know, because I think we would probably be able to find an alternative source of funding, at least for just the sampling and storing, because it's not the major bulk of our spending. The bulk of our spending is analysis.
Right. So for those 3 grants, you just as you just said, you can't, none of the charges you encumbered or you can't book any of that against the NIH money. It all work is all around professional development.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a technicality that we, when it gets closer, we can talk about what's called pre-award. There's a status at OSP where you can start spending, but you're sort of accruing before the money actually gets here. But that's another like in the weeds technical point that doesn't matter until we get to, basically October. But yeah, keep them clean, and the reporting lines have to be clean also. NIH can't. So if you have questions, any other questions?
If we're going to submit a budget and I want to do that, then I shouldn't request funding for that aspect.
Aaron, you want to introduce yourself? There's a timing. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? So if you have additional questions about the submission or the review process, you can direct those to Megan Wenner. And as you know, she's the pilot program director. If you have specific questions about core resources, right? So professional development, they put my email address in the RFA. I do not. I mean, you can email me. My cycle time on email is pretty bad, and I try, but it's not. I just can't keep up. So your better cycle time is to email the mentoring@de-CTR.org. That goes to multiple different people, including Julianne, who can address your question right away or connect you with the resource that you need. So the best way, if you have a question about professional development, mentoring, and I would say not just for this project in general, is to use that email address. For those of you who are at Nemours, you can use an equivalent one that's just mentoring@nemours.org. They go to the same place. But we ask the people outside of Nemours to use just for tracking purposes, to use mentoring@de-CTR.org. For the biostats, epidemiology and research design core, which hopefully you guys have already talked to or have set up to talk to, that's Claudine Jerkovitz. And for community engagement and outreach, it's
your grants.
Christiana. When in doubt, though, if you don't know who to contact, and I would say generally for your research progression, shoot an email to mentoring. And I am serious about this. I wouldn't spend more than 5 minutes trying to figure out what you need to do. If you're stuck, you don't know, you need some advice, just email that group. There's tons of experience there. And we want you focusing on, the scientific aspects of the research, and we'll try to help you with everything else. All right, so another resource that comes from us has to do with specific aims pages. You will do reviews. Oh, I just see it. So it's hard for me to see. I just happened to see Diana's hand go up.
I don't want to be super annoying and like interrupt. So I'm apologizing in advice. But a quick question. I'm sorry. I know Erin is probably laughing because I'm so annoying that way. So when when we got it, one of the things that they asked us was to be to submit to the PD core and the bird core. Like there were like links that you kind of wanted. So we've done that it's kind of required, like to send an email, like, so we've done that and we're gonna hear back from them.
And so I appreciate
You or someone on your team, and from the vertical or the biostatistician. So that we did already. We don't have to do this like additional emails or
No,
anything,
no.
right? This is just if we have like questions.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So, and did you email me?
this, but I am the program coordinator.
I know I went the
online?
right way. I did it
Okay, good.
online and I put in my little name and everything. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Correct. So that'll work its way through the system.
Okay.
Yeah, the required contacts, the eval core tracks to make sure that you did it.
Okay.
These are just questions you have.
Okay.
Right, going forward.
Let me take a picture of this thing.
You can have the slides.
Okay.
I guess I don't know if I gave them to Julianne yet. Oh, you know, they're on the Teams page, Julianne.
Yes, thank you.
So a couple things that I want to touch base on. One has to do with kind of the review process and what you need to be thinking about on the scientific end. And some of that process you've already, like you submitted an LOI that they liked, so you've already gone several steps down the road to how you're going to construct your project. This resource, which is available in multiple different forms, but you can have it on the slides here, is a way to think about your specific aims page, which is, you know, probably hands down the most important page in your whole grant, because that's the one that most people will go to get an idea of what you're doing. And, you know, reviewers will read your whole grant, and we'll talk about some ways you can trip up and make reviewers not like you. But in general, what the data are from NIH is this is the page where you get people enthusiastic, where you have an opportunity to in a way that they can remember, because it's short, it's only one page, remember who you are, what the focus area is, what's the big deal about this project, what you're going to do, and why it's important for them to essentially recommend funding for you. So this is, we'll use this more, and you are welcome to use it with your mentors if you want to set up meetings with me or someone else in the PDC. But it just goes through the components of specific aims pages that appear in successful grants. So a friend, Rick McGee, who's up at Northwestern, he actually did a study of specific aims pages and other components of grants where he did an assessment. And it was done by, he didn't have like large language models, but they used computational statistical approaches and natural language processing to look. So these are the components that are in successful grant pages. And before all the studies were done, it was sort of, you'd read the grant and the aims page and you go, oh, that's a good one, or that's not. This gives you things to specifically focus on. The checklist was actually made for reviewers who are new to NIH. So when, say, Diana sends her specific aims page and we're going to do a review of it, if the person doesn't have a lot of, the reviewer doesn't have a lot of study section experience, I'll send them this. These are the things to kind of comment on and look for in the construction of a specific aims page. So, you know, it's very individualized. People write in different ways. But these are the things that you need to include, right? And that includes things like what's the big deal, significance, what's of the field, right? What's the question? What's the long-term goal of what you're trying to get to? And then you need to focus down into the specific thing you're proposing in the pilot, and what gap, what complication, what need, right? Is this pilot grant addressing? Right. So think like big funnel. So at the top, you need to convince people this is a big problem in the field. You know, patients are dying. There's, you know, we don't know how to treat them. We can't diagnose them. We can't find X, Y, and Z. We don't know the progression. Some big statement of what the question is. And you need to quickly focus the reviewer down to thinking, oh, well, this is the thing that needs to be done. And have them understand why you want to do this specific pilot, right? Short little piece of this big picture, but it should be critical. So I don't want to spend a lot of time going through the nuts and bolts, because it helps to have a draft aims page to use this and go through. But it's provided in the set of slides, and then down below I give reference to where it came from. You can go. I think the Climb program still has these, like the analytics and everything, up on their webpage from where this started. There is a mentoring requirement in the grant. The principal mentor has to be established. I will say, from our perspective, we can help you set up a team. You definitely need a content expert, and you should, or you will have trouble with review. You should have someone on your mentoring team that has NIH grant funding experience, right? So they should be experienced. The primary mentor should be experienced in the area that you're applying from. Have a commitment, whether that's a longstanding relationship or they fill out a mentoring plan, and an established track record for training junior faculty. I bring this up because these people are not easy to find in the state of Delaware or in any IDEA state, but you can have mentors that aren't from Delaware. You should have a mentor from your institution to help you navigate. And you should say that's what they're doing. They're helping you navigate the Nemours system. But the particular person that's going to help you take this pilot grant, right, once it gets awarded, help you write the pilot grant and then leverage that into NIH funding down the road. You have to find that person. If they're not here, you're going to have to find them somewhere else. But you need someone really strong in that role. You work with the mentors, so you need to identify the team up front. And again, I can help somewhat with that. There's often questions about mentor matching, and I'll just be clear, that's not really a thing. The algorithms that match people based on interest don't necessarily give you the best mentoring relationship. And the way this still works is based on networks on top of networks. Right. So I know a little bit about what Diana works on, what she's interested in for this proposal, so I can help her find people because I know tons of them. And I have connections kind of nationally in different networks. Collins, not as much, some, so I would have to get help. But if I don't know the mentors, I know people who know the mentors. So we have to take advantage of those networks. Okay. And you want to get the mentor, the primary mentor, and sort of the outline of the mentoring team on board as soon as you can.
I have another question.
Here's the funding mechanism.
You know, I did the MRDA, which is the mentoring. Okay, so just finished that right now in March. This is like the last time, precisely to write this pilot. So I had like 4 mentors for that. And I've now, for my project that I'm doing right now, I stayed with my primary mentor, who's amazing and fantastic. And then like one of the men, like Carissa, who was one of my mentors, is a collaborator. And I have identified different people, like Sigrid, who was also one of my mentors, is a collaborator now on the project. Now, you said on your previous slide, like we are encouraging applicants to identify more than one mentor, but is that something? I mean, am I okay with just one mentor? Like in the LOI, I said it was only one mentor. I think they saw that and they saw the team. So just kind of like, I want to clarify that.
Yeah, so that statement is actually the opposite of what you're thinking.
Okay.
If you're fine with one mentor, you're fine with one mentor.
Okay.
There are still a fair number of people that think they should only have one mentor.
Okay.
And this is more of an encouragement. We'll think about what you actually need to learn,
Okay.
where you need support, and identify more. It's hard to find one person that fulfills. I mean, you found the one person that you need, and that's fine. This is more for people that are thinking the other way. You know, they still have the same mentor they had from, the research they did as a resident, and they're sticking with it, even though that person doesn't do the same kind of analytics or something else. Try to encourage them to broaden.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
So you'll have to fill out an individual development plan, which I don't know when that happens. Again, I can't access the actual mechanism that we use for submission or specifically how that happens. But IDP is really a pretty simple tool. They are remarkably useful. In fact, there's thousands of literature references to the utility of individual development plans. They're used in other industries and in other disciplines far more than they're used in research and clinical translational research. But a lot of the major systems, CTSAs, the CTR, other big funded programs insist on using them because of the strength of them. But you can think that the IDP is really an articulation of a 5-year goal for you. And you work with your mentor on that, right? I'm going to get a Nobel Prize in 5 years. So your mentor will talk you down from that. But it's really your SMART goals. What are you shooting for in 5 years? And then within specific domains, clinical, teaching, research, and leadership, 1-year goals, right? And it seems a little odd. I know you guys are all clinical. It seems a little odd that to have a clinical requirement as a domain for someone that works in a laboratory. But those folks are encouraged to think about learning more about pathophysiology or learning more about the, kind of the diagnostic odyssey for the patients so they can better design their studies. So the domains, only one of them is research, but this plan is about you, not about the project. And it's meant to give your mentors and you a starting point. The first IDP is a starting point, but by the end of your pilot work, that should be refined down, and you should have a and that's a SMART goal, and you have very specific sort of benchmarks that you're going for this year, and then below those yearly goals, there's immediate objective.
Non-clinical.
I use these. So Diana, if I'm working with you, which actually we should talk about collaborations, not necessarily with this, but other collaborations. We
Interest has been
each have the thing we're going to do by the next monthly meeting. So for the IDP, that immediate objective, and these are, the objectives are renewed, might be, I'll send you my PAS abstract by, I know the deadline's already passed, but by, whatever the date is. And if it's smart and very specific that way, when you come back next month and you haven't done it, or you did do it, or you did it early, we can kind of hone in on, okay, well, let's pick up the pace on that kind of thing because you got it done in 2 weeks, not a month. Or why is it that one specific objective you were late on? But was it something came up? Was it clinical responsibilities? It didn't make sense. But it focuses the interaction with your mentors, again, plural, usually plural, in a way that aligns with your annual and then your 5-year goals. So it's pretty simple, but it requires some thought, and it does get reviewed. So we've seen problems where people don't think about it. I know they know what they want to do this year. They're going to submit the Corey grant or whatever it is. They know they're going to do it, but they don't put it in, and they don't work with their mentors to come up with specific articulations of those goals. So it's a pretty simple thing. Once you have your mentors figured out, just write it and submit it. Don't wait, right? It really helps align your progression. And in fact, doing this early helps you write the grant because it becomes clear what your 1-year goal is. You have a 1-year pilot to try to attain part of that goal and what you're going to chunk off first, second, third in terms of the objectives. So the mentoring plan will come from the mentor. It's another document that gets reviewed, but it's also, excuse me, one that's relatively simple to understand. We need, especially if we don't, CTR is big, Delaware is big. There's a lot of people working on a lot of different things. One of the key metrics or one of the key leading indicators for investigator success is a strong mentoring relationship. So we just want to see that. And you're required to have a mentor. We want to adjudicate whether or not it's a good plan. If you get this stuff to us early, we can help you fix it, like spruce it up, strengthen it before you actually submit for the review. But the mentoring plan is actually submitted by the mentor. They will need your name. This seems like an odd thing to remind you of, but we've seen mentoring plans where it's not even clear who they're talking about because they went into it without really thinking about it or without realizing that it's adjudicated. It's part of our picking people that we think are going to be successful. And to be clear, selfishly for the program, we need you guys all hitting home runs. So if there's a weakness, if it comes down to who's going to get the grant, right, Colin or a guy who's already an associate professor who has shown that they can do the work and they're shown that they can be productive. If Colin doesn't have strong mentoring, he's going to lose. So it helps you guys compete. It helps us make sure that you're well supported, and it helps the program overall identify the people that are going to get the wins for them that we need to continue to get funding. So the mentoring plan, and I want to talk a lot about biosketches today, so I won't go into details. There's examples of mentoring plans. I'm happy to talk about what goes into a mentoring plan. If your mentor's been around the block a few times, they've written these things. You write them for K grants, you're writing for F grants, you write them, as you're sponsoring people for promotion. So they'll be used to it. You do want them to be pretty specific. Pilots are short, and this plan has to do with the pilot. IDP's you long term. This is the plan for the what's going to happen with them during the pilot. And we're going to meet on a weekly basis to start, and then a monthly basis. And our first goal is going to be blah blah, whatever it is. You have to get this paper out, or you have to get analyses done. So just articulate what you're going to do in a plan that allows everybody to understand that these folks have worked together, they know each other. This is a strong mentor. They've trained other people, and they have a plan going forward that will assure success for the pilot grant submitter. Okay. All right. I'm going to skip this. So the grant itself, if you've been through NIH grants are historically judged on 5 different levels, right? And then an overall impact score. As a caveat, that's changing in 2025, but don't worry about that right now. So the significance, which is, and I'll tell you what these things mean in a second from NIH's point of view. The investigative team, which for you guys includes mentors, innovation, which is a little bit nebulously defined because how much you're really going to innovate in a year with, a relatively small amount of money, but it's still a scored criterion. The approach, which is by far the most important thing in the research plan. So NIH did studies on this. So approach and significance are the 2 things that matter the most, approach being more important than significance to getting a good overall impact score. Environment, do you have enough resources? Can you do it? Is the facility adequate? And that all rolls up in an overall impact score. Those are scored on a scale from 1 to 9 by individuals. And then on the panel, in an NIH study section, for example, those scores are averaged and then multiplied by 10. So 1 is considered exceptional, essentially no through the interface, outstanding and excellent. So a 3, which sounds like a pretty poor score, is still considered excellent from NIH's perspective. And in fact, a 5 is supposed to be the average. But 1 you can think is none of the reviews had anything to say that would improve it. It's essentially an exceptional submission, all the way down to 9, which gets toward the borderline. This should never be done. This doesn't make any sense. This is very poor. So what you'll see, though, is you'll get a score from each of the reviewers, and then an overall score. So they'll score each of these criteria, and then an overall impact. So if the group all says, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, when you average that to 1.5, the score you're told is 15. And that's what comes back out of NIH. In addition, there's a mentorship score, a community engagement score, and then the community pilots, which I don't think any of you guys are community pilots. Is that true? You're just regular pilots?
Yeah, regular, at least mine.
I think
Mine
that's
is
true
a community pilot.
Okay, so you'll have a separate review, and you have slightly different budgetary requirements and timing for yours. But we can set up a separate time, or you can talk to Megan Wenner, about the
Okay,
differences
great. Thank
between
you.
the 2. Right, but so the standard scores will be given, but then there's also some additional scores.
So can I
Okay.
just provide, there's a community engagement score for like clinically oriented research?
You can apply, there's 2 tracks you can apply for. So if you applied for a standard pilot, you'll talk about community engagement. I think everyone is required to talk about community, but I don't think you get separately adjudicated on that. If you applied for a community engaged research, talk about some of the requirements, separate merit score that goes with it.
All right.
Do you remember specifying?
Yes, I remember specifying it. It was certainly is not a community education,
Yeah.
a community engagement pilot.
Yeah.
I guess I just wasn't really clear on how community engagement would be like relevant, expressed, and measured in my particular case.
Yep. So the thing to do is to talk to the community engagement, right? So what we CTR wants is that everyone thinks about it. So in your particular case for the study you're thinking about, yeah, I get it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but long term, in terms of your trajectory overall, so think now you're 5, 6, 7 years down the road, and you have major funding coming in. Understanding now how communities will help you get funding and how communities will help you, design better grants. That's all we want at this point. But what you should do is talk to Lee Pachter's group about what you can and should be saying or thinking about in terms of community engagement. Right.
Okay.
Sounds weird because it would be less to do with the pilot and more to do with the overall sweep of what you're thinking about, right? Your plans long term.
Okay.
Okay. So the scoring criteria, again, I told you there's those 5, and then overall, this is what NIH says. The reviewers mostly have NIH experience, so this is what we think. So significance, which is kind of self-evident, is it important, right? And it may be important to you, but if I'm the reviewer, you have to convince me. Like I usually take the tact that if you don't tell me, I don't know. I may be able to layer on some of my past experience why something's so important to help the panel understand, but really the onus is on the investigator to explain why it's significant. So you should always, so we do projects on cerebral palsy. So even though I know the reviewers or surgeons that deal with CP kids or therapists or something, and they know the disease, I always say it anyway. Number 1 cause of physical disability, and the CDC estimated incidence of 1 in 345. I outline the problem and why it's such a big problem in the significant section, and I encourage you to do that. You have to do it quickly and succinctly and very much to the point, but don't assume that people know or would necessarily agree with you that your problem that you're trying to solve is critical if you don't tell them how it's critical to progress. In the significant section, you have to, which you'll have a little bit to write on, you have to talk about what's motivating you to do this, and is there a solid ground, right? Is it rigorous? Is it solid ground? What you're proposing to do, is it coming from something that's well understood? So what you're proposing is a new idea, but the rationale, the basis for it is rigorous. And then ideas of if you win, if you do all of this and everything is achieved and successful, and I guess as scientists, you're not supposed to put your chips into one pot or the other, but what happens if you're right and you prove everything that's being proposed? How does that move things forward? So that's all in the significant section. I'm just hinting at this idea that review is going to change in 2025. Starting in 2025, that section is going to be much more circumscribed, because as you'll see, and I won't go through all of the wording in all of these, but when you look at the slides, there's some overlap, right? So something might be significant because it's innovative. And what NIH expects is you'll sort of explain those things differently, but that's kind of hard to do. So there is some overlap back and forth, but significance, remember I said, is the number 2 driver for your score, for getting a good score. So make sure you explain why it's important and why what you do will be impactful and significant. Investigators, that's kind of obvious. You just make sure that the reviewer understands the team can do the work. Innovation is broadly kind of paradigm shifting. Again, that's really hard to do in a pilot. So think of the innovation overall in the trajectory. So the pilot will take one step. That might be descriptive data, right? Which is hard to, because you need it to get the grant. Or that might be some experimentation that just allows you to motivate the bigger grant that you want want to get. But you can talk about innovation broadly. If we can fix this problem, right, this is significant. If we can fix this problem, it has a big impact. We are proposing sort of a framework or a way to approach that problem that's different, it's new, and we're the ones that thought of it, right? So, but I wouldn't worry too much about the innovation part. It's you required, but it's not going to drive a whole lot. The thing you should spend the most time on is approach. Make sure everything's well motivated. Make sure that if there's a weakness in the prior literature, that you at least understand that weakness. And then if you're doing controls or you have a control group in your study, because something's not known in the literature, you should point that out. You want the reviewers to look at it and go, oh, you really do know, right, what's the problem in the field, and you have a way to fix it. Your strategies have to be robust, unbiased. They should, and you can talk to Megan about the details of how much space you should dedicate for any human subjects research and talking about relevant variables. So there's a big, or there has been for years, a big push at NIH about sex as a biological variable, but there's also other biological variables. So if you're, and I'm not saying any of you are doing this, but if you were proposing to only do your study in males or in females, you would have to strongly justify why you're doing that, and how you're going to address sex as a covariate or as a variable associated with the disease state. The human subjects part, that's a whole separate set of discussions. So if you have not looked at the human subjects forms or started IRB or anything like that yet, let me know and we'll get you connected with someone to help you go through all of the ins and outs of what you're going to have to do. But it sounds like at least two of you have already gone IRB, so you've gone down most of this road already. If not, let me know or let us know. You will have to provide sort of a document about your enrollment plans. Those are based on NIH criteria. So think they want to make sure that you are representing the population. And for me, I use the state of October comes around, which seems like a state of Delaware to identify the population. So how many non-Hispanic people that report themselves as non-Hispanic Black, you calculate that number, that's your planned enrollment. So you tell them based on the population, unless I've already justified using a specific subgroup, say specific sex or gender or something, if I don't do that, if there's no reason, inclusion or exclusionary criteria, then I have to provide a broad enrollment of the population in the state. Again, because it's small.
Can I ask a
small
question about that?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So
Applies also if it's an animal study.
are the major referral center for infants with heart disease in Delaware and several other contiguous regions of the multi-state area, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey.
Mhm.
So my approach would specify that I'm just going to enroll every newborn with heart disease, of a certain gestational age that presents to Nemours. But it wouldn't be I wouldn't have a goal of enrolling specific groups of races and genders within that group, because I'm not excluding anybody based on any of those criteria. I'm just trying to get as many newborns as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a rational approach, but that's not the intent of NIH's requirement. So NIH requires that you actively make sure that you fill the categories. And if you can't, that you explain why. So think of it, so we have the same problem, right? So we have a study that enrolls kids that are coming in for surgery, they're orthopedic surgery. We had studies with cardiovascular, but no longer. So the plan is we'll just get everybody, but analytically we have to fill the groups. So we'll have our plan. So you're enrolling, I don't remember what the numbers is. It's close to 50-50 males and females now, right? It's 51-49 overall. So if we're enrolling and just by some dumb luck, our percentages as we're getting close to say 2/3 full enrollment, we have 70% males and 30% females, then we have to start enrolling more females. Like we have to get the numbers up to fill the category. In the context of a pilot, because the N, I don't know how many, if you're really going to enroll everybody, it's a little bit different because you're just trying to get some bearings. But the goal of the regulation, which by the way, as an editorial needs to change because the categories they ask you for are not relevant anymore. But they're expecting that you will get them. So if there, for whatever reason, there's a bias in referral, so African Americans aren't coming to Nemours, that's your problem, not theirs. You can't say, well, we're just taking everybody that shows up. You have to fill the criteria, fill the boxes. Given the fact that you have access to that many patients, it probably won't be a problem, but you do have to fill out the form in the beginning, and then this is, again, only 1 year, so think longer, like a 5-year project, R01. Along the way, you talk to the program officer, say, well, this is what our actual enrollment looks like, and here's what I propose to fix it, and then work with them to make sure that it fills.
But these like requirements are available and you can kind of like look at them and see them, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a spread. I mean, if you want to, I can show you the spreadsheet that I use, which is just based on census demographics from the state of Delaware, right? Because I mean, you might want to make it the regional because you're getting kids from a bigger area, but I tend to use the Delaware. So basically in the census data, I know the percentages for each of the categories, what percent of the population for each of the categories that NIH requires, and I know how many kids I'm going to enroll. So it just calculates out and says it's a U50 for this kid, and you do some rounding, and then that's your target, so that your study, right, the kids you enrolled in the study represents the population of the state. So I can show you that. It's a good thing to get out of the way early. I mean, do you have the N? Have you done a power analysis and everything already, Colin? Do you know how many kids you're going to enroll?
We're going to enroll the number of infants that present with heart disease as newborns to Nemours.
Period. Okay.
50. The power analysis doesn't really apply to the microbiome situation because the number of data points is like so enormous. But the secondary outcome, which was the rates of NEC, we would never be able to prove. So we'd already changed the language in our grant to make the microbiome the primary outcome and the NEC to be rates of NEC to be an exploratory outcome. Because even with let's say we had 100% enrollment, it would be about 50 infants. Once you divide that to high risk and low risk categories effectively, and then stratify by exposure of interest, you have like 15 patients in each group, so it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, the enrollment, like the inclusion in the study from NIH is for the table that you have to prepare. And again, the program officer can guide you more about what they really want. For my work, we ignore any stratification or analysis of covariance or anything. So if I'm going to enroll a total of 50 kids, when I prepare the table, I don't even consider the fact that I'm going to split them into 2 groups and I need the same number of males and females. That's a different calculation. It's just that among 50 kids, I better make sure I have this representation. So it does play into what you can do, because you have to enroll, say, both males and females, right, identified at birth. If you can't do that analytically, this upper part where you talk about sex as a variable, you just explain, look, we're not powered to do this fully. We recognize that there are sexual dimorphisms, or that there's differences in severity or presentation, but for this study, we're only going to enroll males and justify it. So those two things have to tie together. But a priori, the expectation is you're not going to on audit type analysis, you didn't exclude any classes, which I know you're not intending to, but by dumb luck, we had this happen with kids coming in for spine surgeries. There was just a big run, and we were low in one side, so we had to basically cut enrollments. We couldn't afford to keep enrolling everybody. we can talk more about it and how to fill out that form. I know, Aaron, Julian, did I send you guys that spreadsheet that I use? There's just a spreadsheet that I use for generating budgets that includes a tab on this form, this planned enrollment form that I can share with you guys.
Pretty sure it's in there.
In the tab, in the GIN channel?
Yeah, I think in sub-channel 05 with templates. It's
Mhm.
not for the part, so Colin, if you see it, you may still want to set up a consultation just to go through it.
Yeah,
But
it is not written to share. So if you're very savvy with Excel and sort of formulas in Excel and, you know, lookup tables and things like that, then you can figure it out. You just have to click and look and see how Rob's brain put it all together. Or you can just set up a time and I can show you. It's just Excel. There's not much coding, but there are some Booleans and some lookup tables and things that are in there. So like Aaron said, not for the faint of heart, but if you use Excel all the time, you can figure it out.
This seems like surprisingly involved and complicated for one relatively small
Yes.
aspect of the study. I was really not expecting.
Yep.
Have to go to the census data for a bunch of variables that I may not even have any interest in collecting, and then make sure that I don't know how many variables you're even describing, and there's not even any biological plausibility why non-Hispanic whites and Caucasians should have important differences in any meaningful areas other than some social determinants of health.
Correct.
So it's very strange to me.
But think government requirement, not rational scientific planning.
No, I do. I am understanding of that. I didn't see a specific enrollment form supplied. I have not seen any indication of this requirement, and it actually seems like quite a complex and important requirement that I'm quite surprised to find.
Yeah, it should be in the human subjects form, and I can, if Megan were on, so there's usually a PDF, and I'm sorry, this part I can't see, but Colin, if you want to set up a time, we can just go in and look, and I'll show you, and if they're not asking for it, I'm surprised, because NIH is going to ask for it later. But maybe they're not going to make you do it up front. And
well, it doesn't say anything about this form in the application requirements, nor in the emails that were sent, sort of delineating what was required. And it wasn't what this form you're describing, unless saying it's a specific component of the human subjects form, which I haven't looked at, wasn't even provided either. So
yeah.
I'm surprised by it, and it sounds like a lot more work than what I would have kind of expected someone would just to say, this is the distribution of our patient population that we see, and that's what we're gonna do.
So you can help me. So two things. One is that's one of the reasons we have flight school, because if you leave the human subjects forms until the end, and because I already have a lookup table with the demographics, actually populating that table is not hard. I can help you do it. If you try to do it on your own, which is how back in the day before we had flight school, people would do it, their heads would explode. You're going to collect in this packet, and all of a sudden there's all of this information that NIH and the government requires for you to get federal funding that no one told you about. So I can help with that. For a pilot, it's really not that hard, unless you're doing some interventional study with on an IND, which I don't, we've never seen a pilot come through associated with an IND. It's really not hard to do. It is hard to figure out what to do, though. So I can help. And anybody who's on the call that wants help with that, we can get you connected. So one is, that's why we're doing this, and happy to help. The other is, I'm not sure the broader CTR community understands how much harder it is to do a human subjects proposal. So I asked this question, and I don't know who was, I think the meeting was open. We had an external advisory committee meeting, and sort of what I was asking for in kind of a broad sense was equipoise in terms of how all of this is allocated, the responsibility for writing a grant, and then how the grant's adjudicated. So if the score you're going to get is based on the research plan and specifically the approach and the significance, you should spend most of your time on those in the specific aims page. If you, Colin, are required to do all of this other stuff, and say you've allocated 100 hours to write this thing, but 50 of them are required to do all of these other pieces that don't help you get funded. They just take your time away. You are on an unfair field competing with people that aren't doing human subjects research, because at the end of the day, their approach is going to be tighter. They're going to have found things, and it's kind of all about polishing the grant. So there is sort of, and equipoise isn't quite the right word, but that's the idea that's not present right now. So what I talked to Greg about is, well, I'm going to try to get more upfront helping people with their human, because it's a clinical and translational research grant. It's hard for them to fund clinical research. And I think one of the reasons is once you get to this kind of blinded merit review, nobody cares that you didn't have time, right? They just read it and they go, well, this is a better proposal. And if you had been given the time, you could have easily fixed yours. So those two things, I'm been around the block a few times and I get it. I remember when these regs changed and we're all reading for the first time, they're expecting us to do what? But now it's pretty, I can help you get through it pretty quickly, but we should do it soon. And I can show you the spreadsheet, and if it turns out you want to change or you have some other estimate for your N, you just go in and plop the number in and it generates the other numbers that you need.
Rob,
But
I would
you're
also
right.
like to get some help with that.
Sure.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I don't know in my, go ahead, Colin, finish.
oh no,
Finish.
sorry. I will take you up on that offer. I'm also just gonna ask Carol to see how much of this she can do for me, because it sounds like she has experience with the human subjects forms and stuff.
Carol
So,
Prospero?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's a gold mine. She's
So
awesome. Yeah.
so I'll get her. I mean, she's involved in our project, so I'll get her to help me with some of this stuff. She already said she's going to start working on the human subjects form, so maybe this will all be done and I won't have to worry about it.
Now,
That's it. That's what we want. We want it done soon so you don't have to worry about it. Yep.
Okay.
now, Rob, I am using biobanked samples. So
Yep.
that, I think it's a little different because those have already gone through the process of being admitted. You know, they're in the biobank. They've already, you know, all of that.
They're
But I still,
consented, but they're sort of not enrolled in your study yet. So if your biobank, by again dumb luck, doesn't have any Black Hispanic samples like from kids that were reported, you just don't have any. NIH isn't going to care, right?
Okay.
You have to have for the N that
So
you
one
want.
of the things that I actually did for the LOI is I looked at the cancer registry, and I had it. I had a table of patients in the cancer registry and patients in the biobank, and we realized that there was like no significant difference, you know, based on age, sex, ethnicity, and race. So I did that already just to make sure, like, okay, we can use these samples because there is like no difference with the cancer registry, which is like the gold standard of like everybody that
for
has cancer
demographics.
for demographics. So you think I get by with that, or I should do more?
So I think you can get by with that, but your population, like the population you're starting with,
Yeah.
this kind of the
Yeah.
denominator will be different if you're basing it on the large cancer registry.
So I'm
But you
not
can,
I did like, I took like 30, you know, whatever. I have a population of like 145. I took like 30 and we looked at 30 in the cancer registry and we looked them together and they were like, okay, there's no statistical significance between the two. There shouldn't be, because the majority of kids that are in the biobank also, I mean, everybody goes into the cancer registry. Not every kid consented for a patient to be done in the biobank,
correct.
but we want to make sure that there was no bias there, like, you know, maybe only, you know, white kids are like coming into the biobank, which we proved that already. So I'm kind of wondering,
You
should
still
we
have
do
to have
more?
a planned enrollment.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, don't try not to think about study design at that form, because it will drive you nuts.
No, I'm meeting
What
with you.
they're
I'm not
asking.
even looking at the form
Yeah.
before like meeting with you or
Yeah,
whoever you
don't look at the, I
decide.
mean, we just fill out the form. We'll just fill out the form. That's your target. At the
Okay.
end, if you don't hit your target, you have to explain it. Basically,
Okay.
that's how you should think about it. But to Colin's point, filling out the damn form is not that straightforward. And the directions that come from NIH-funded project until you get, they're usually not that clear. They only make sense to the people that have been doing it for a long time.
Okay.
So I'm happy to set up other meetings and interactions. I did promise that I would bring up bio sketches, which I have all of -1 minute to do. So the bio sketches, and we will look at bio sketches as a group going forward. They have very specific criteria, and the CTR admins and I think NIH has not been happy with the nature of our bio sketches because they're not fulfilling the criteria of what's supposed to be in a bio sketch. So if you got specific comments back on your LOI, actually any, but in particular about the bio sketch, make sure you address them, because all you're going to do is tick off the people who end up having to deal with the fact that the bio sketch doesn't fit the format. And it to me, this also falls into this category of, well, these are kind of administrative rules as opposed to scientific, like what's the best science. But the bio sketch is how the reviewers look at your team. That's what they read. So if the information the reviewer is expecting to see, so I just pulled up this statement right here. These are the directions. What I'm expecting to see in a personal statement, it has to do with your role on the specific project. If I'm reviewing a grant and I flip to Diana Corral's bio sketch and it just talks about her history, it doesn't even mention what she's doing on the grant, I automatically don't like your grant anymore. So there is an upside to getting all of this correct, not just the administrative part or the fact that they won't be able to submit everything because NIH wants everything in their format. So we do have to talk about bio sketches, which we'll do going forward. But I can now, Julianne and Aaron, I did bring it up, right? Somebody asked me to bring up bio sketches.
She left. She was like,
Check.
I'm
Oh,
done.
did she?
She had another meeting.
So,
Yeah.
so this is.
Time in that Megan Wenner specifically stated, please make sure your bio sketches are correctly formatted for all of the bio sketches. So not just yours, but your mentors and collaborators, and make sure it's specific to the roles on this particular project. It seems some of the bio sketches were submitted and addressed a totally different project. So, check for everything matches and it's correct. It's on the right format. But those were comments that Megan specifically said, so I thought I would share that with you guys.
So if we didn't get anything that says anything about our bio sketches, we assume that they're okay.
No,
all we need from patients that does.
I wouldn't assume everything's okay.
Okay.
I would assume.
They were not on the bottom third. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
you're just not in the bottom third, right?
Oh, that's good. Okay, yeah. I'll take not being in on the.
Right, it wasn't bad enough where someone felt like they had to say it. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders and like, I can't believe it. But Megan's not saying that to be difficult. She is the one that gets asked why they aren't aligned, and she gets asked by program officers at NIH. Like from NIH's perspective, these directions could not be simpler. There are some things you should include. You don't have to, you should. There are some things you have to include. So if you're not following the format, Megan puts all this energy and everything and recommends you for funding. If NIH comes back and says, well, they didn't use the right forms, no funding, that's a problem. So I think we're all trying to get out in front of it. It's a weird thing because the biosketch, the biosketch can hurt you in a way. This is from my own experience. I've never read someone's biosketch and thought, oh, I have to give them a better score. I'll read significance and aims and approach and go, wow, this is fantastic. This is a 1. But if I'm thinking you're a 3 and I read your biosketch, it's not changing. It can hurt you. So there is a reason and a reason to do it early, to get your biosketch set up and in the right format and communicating the right things. And one high level rule to keep in mind for a biosketch is it's specific to the submission. So there's no such thing. Dividing line is when you can spend the money. There's big chunks of your biosketch that are generic that you don't change, but you can't just submit, like Aaron said, a biosketch from a previous study for the next study because it's supposed to be specific for your role. And we can go, I did a brilliant presentation at the GIN meeting this past Thursday, which I think is recorded on this. So maybe Aaron, if you can share the link. It wasn't really brilliant. All I did was go through the rules and give some suggestions about biosketches and how to keep up on other rules that sometimes seem like they change out from under your feet while you're in the middle of working on something, and I will change a rule and how to look out for things that are coming. Okay, so I'm sorry we are over. If you want to set up another time, that's great. The idea is that the junior, like the people who are new, we're encouraging you to interact with the professional development core more and earlier. I don't review anymore. I used to review, so I was conflicted. So if I helped Colin with his documents, I couldn't review on the panel, right? Because I'm basically on two sides. But since I don't actually do merit review anymore, I can help you. And that's true for Julianne and Aaron also. We have to be careful about conflicting people. So we can't
Find an alternative source of funding at least.
Diana's office if Diana's given out the money and be told how to do things correctly. If no one at UD or DSU finds out, that's a big problem, and that'll get an audit finding. But since the PDC now is structured differently, we have a whole component that can help you with the writing. It's still going to get judged, but at least you have input from people that used to do the reviews and do a lot of reviews on how to structure. All right, well, thank you guys. Apologies
So how do
for
we set up a
going
meeting with you?
You can email mentoring@nemours.org, or if you're from outside, mentoring@de-ctr.org.
Okay, perfect.
And it's not necessarily going to be me, but it'll be somebody that can help you. Yeah.
Okay, will someone answer that PD core that I submitted? Should I wait until I get that, or should I go ahead and email?
I don't know how to do that. Do you know how to? Do you know how to do that, Aaron? We'll look at it. Email.
I don't see anything come through, so I'm not sure.
I would
Okay.
email.
Okay, I'm emailing.
The web team is working really hard, but there's a lot of glitchiness in the structure. So yesterday I went on.
mentoring@nemours.org?
Yeah, for
Okay.
you, because you're at Nemours. The equivalent, so Margaret, equivalent is mentoring@de-CTR.
Yeah, I got actually that one, but
Yeah.
I want the
Yeah,
numbers. Okay.
Yeah, they're the same.
I wrote that down too.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
They get you to the same place.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. Thank you
Right,
so
thank
much.
you.
You're
Always good to
welcome.
hear from you.
Yeah,
Bye.
let us keep in touch, and we'll try to help stage things so you can get the kind of the stuff that's pain in the neck and not really helpful to fund, structured and done, so you can go focus on the research and go get the.
Okay.
There's a little bit of a technical.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. See you guys. Have a good
Bye-bye.
weekend.